folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, I've been on a bit of a Tele journey. Now I'm going to tell you all about that journey. If you want to skip ahead to the playing and just hear the guitar that you've seen in the title of this video and in that bit of intro playing there, I'll put a timestamp on screen now to where you can do that, and it will also be in the YouTube slider bar. So if you don't want to listen to this long introduction and you want to skip ahead to just the loud bit, that is absolutely fine. Anyway, I've always loved the Fender Telecaster. I grew up a big Status Quo fan and Tom Petty fan and Bruce Springsteen fan, and there's something about the single coil twang of a Tele bridge pickup that just sort of hits me here. Now the Tele I've had here for a good few years now, and if you're a regular to this channel you'll have seen this loads, is this one, my white Japanese made 52 Reissue, built in 1996. And I've upgraded the hardware in it and all the electronics, so it sounds wonderful. But there are a couple of things about this guitar that I've always found a little bit of a struggle. The first is that I've had to shim the neck because it was kind of set at the wrong pitch from the factory. But despite doing that, I still have to have the action jacked up quite a way off the fretboard to stop the guitar choking out in the second half of the neck. So especially with my very thick strings that I like to use, this guitar sounds amazing, but it really is a bit of a handful to get the notes out cleanly. And also, I've never been wild about the sort of thick poly lacquer that Fender use on a lot of their guitars. Just for my own personal preferences and aesthetical reasons, I prefer nitrocellulose. But nevertheless, this is a very good Tele. It's served me very well over the years, and I should say it's not going anywhere. You'll still see this guitar on the channel a lot going forwards. But I've recently got on the waiting list for an incredible set of Tele pickups. And I kind of wanted an incredible Tele to put them into when they land here in a few months, rather than just a very good Tele. And also I've got that 52 dialed in to sound exactly as I want it to sound. I don't particularly want to mess with it. So I kind of began scouting the talent, as it were, as a possible upgrade and a Tele to sit alongside my MIJ 52. So when I started looking into all this, I thought, just out of idle curiosity, let's start right at the top, and I began looking at Fender Custom Shop guitars. So I went onto a few websites, looked at some custom shops, saw the prices they sell for, and nearly fell off my chair. They are stratospheric money. So I thought, okay, maybe there's a second-hand custom shop Fender out there for me. So I eventually found one, and it was going for literally the same price as they were going for new. So here in the UK at least, they seem to really hold their value. So Fender Custom Shop was kind of out for me. They're just astronomical money. So I thought, okay, what's the next tier down the ladder to still get an amazing guitar, but for slightly less cash? So I did actually find another custom shop Fender that was part of a limited run commissioned by a guitar shop here in the UK called Coda Music. Weirdly, it was being sold by another retailer. But for whatever reason, it was slightly less money. Still really, really expensive, but it was starting to move in the right direction. And I suspect the reason it was slightly cheaper than the other custom shop Fenders I'd seen was because it wasn't a 51 Nocaster or a 52 Tele reissue. It was kind of a greatest hits of various 50s specs. So it had a slightly flatter fretboard radius so it didn't choke out on the upper frets. Big tick in the box there. Nitrocellulose lacquer. Big tick in the box there. And it has some hand-wound pickups. So I was looking at that guitar and really kind of wanting it, but it was still way more than I could afford, and I was considering taking out a finance deal to try and get it. Anyway, eventually it sold, so that was off the table. But I don't want to call it a criticism, but one thing about most custom shop Fenders that I'm not wild about is that most of them, not all, but the vast majority, are relict guitars. And I've got nothing against relic guitars. I think they can look absolutely wonderful. And for me, I love a guitar that tells a story in terms of being a bit worn and the lacquer's faded and it's got some dings in it. But the story it tells, for me, on a guitar that I'm going to buy and love and play and own, I want that story it tells to be a real story rather than, someone's taken a chisel to it before it ships. And some of those custom shop Fenders, they genuinely look like they've been dragged through a few miles behind the delivery van on the way to the shop. They are so beaten up. So I've got nothing against them. I think they can look amazing. But whilst I love guitars that have character, I like that to be genuine character. So anyway, that custom shop Fender sold, and I thought, okay, what else is out there? So I found a 70s Tele on reverb, and I think it's still there, so please somebody go and buy it and put me out of my misery. But it was such a vibey looking guitar. The lacquer was so yellowed, it had been hacked up and had a middle pickup, so the price was less than an all original 70s Tele would have been. It was just a wonderful looking guitar. But again, too much money, and I was kind of thinking I might try and go for it, but eventually I thought financially it just counts me out. So again, what's the next rung down the ladder to get an amazing guitar but without paying that money? So I found another guitar being sold pretty locally to me, which is a Fender American Original Tele, and it was a run they did for about 4 years, I think 6 or 7 years ago. Only did it for a short period of time, and it was kind of everything that the Coda Custom Shop Tele was, but non-custom shop and therefore half the price. So flatter fretboard radius, big chunky sort of 52 style neck, nitrocellulose lacquer, all the things I was kind of looking for. But there was something about that guitar that I just didn't particularly like. And I think one of the things might have been the particular shade of butterscotch that they went with. To be honest, it looked a little bit like a Squire. I was never going to say that to anyone at Fender or the shop that was selling it. But for me to think about spending that much money on a guitar, it has to be the right guitar. I didn't want to kind of buy it because it was the only thing out there that was kind of fulfilling the specs I was looking for, but I didn't really like it. There's no point spending money on something you're not 100% sold on. So at that point, I thought, you know what? Let's put this Tele Search on the back burner, because the pickups aren't going to be here for a good few months, and even if I then have to wait for a bit to get the right guitar to put them in, that's not a problem at all. So I just kind of, throttled off a little bit. Anyway, last week I think it was, I spotted this on eBay. And this is a Ron Kirn Barnbuster. Now, I'd come across Ron in online forums, and I knew he had a really good reputation, but I didn't really know much about him. So when I saw this, I began doing some digging. And Ron is one of those guys who's been building guitars for decades, and he just knows what he's doing. He's a one-man operation based in Florida, I think it is. And reading around on all the forums, doing all my due diligence before I pulled the trigger on this thing, I basically found lots and lots and lots of threads of people who were very familiar with custom shop Fenders, real kind of Tele aficionados, who were saying very routinely that Ron's guitars, they don't just rival the Fender Custom Shop, they rival the Fender Master Builders. His attention to detail, how he builds them, how he sets them up and does the fret jobs, and everything about his instruments is just next level. So I did all that reading, and I messaged the seller and basically negotiated to buy this. So end of last week, I drove down to Devon, picked it up and brought it home. But I was actually away from home for the first few days, so I couldn't plug the thing in. So I was kind of sat there on the sofa, sort of noodling on it. And I eventually decided to take some pictures of it and send them to Ron and just ask him what the specs of this guitar are. Because another thing I read about Ron online is he loves to use reclaimed woods. So woods that have been used for another purpose in the past, he then gets them as planks and turns them into a guitar. And the only thing I knew about the bodywood of this guitar was it was loblolly pine, which is a bit of a mouthful. But that's all I knew. It has some imperfections on it, so I'm guessing it was kind of reclaimed from something, but that was all I knew, and that's all the previous owner knew. So I sent him some pictures and the serial number of the guitar, and just asked him for any information he could give me. Anyway, within literally 10 minutes, he shot me a reply. And he told me the story of this bodywood. Now, this particular Barnbuster isn't a standard off-the-shelf Barnbuster. It was a custom order by somebody who spent a huge amount of money on it back in the day. And as a result, he used some of the nicest wood he had for the body. Now, this particular piece of pine was reclaimed from a factory in New York, not as in stored in the factory, as in like the building of the factory, like the walls. And that factory was built in 1836. So this particular piece of wood is nearly 200 years old. So in terms of me loving guitars that have a bit of a story behind them, but a genuine story, this is it. This is a 200-year-old piece of pine. And as soon as I found that out, I started salivating. Anyway, I found out a few more things about it as well. The bridge it has on here is a Glendale cold-rolled steel blackguard bridge with the sides cut away for better access, and Glendale are up there with Callahan as being the best money no object vintage reissue of old Fender bridges. Do they sound different from kind of current production Fender bridges? Jury's out on that one, but in terms of just being historic spec and the right thickness to get the right tone and all that sort of stuff, it's as good as you can get. Now, as I said, this was a custom ordered guitar, so it had a 4-way switch in it, which isn't standard, as you all know. It had the 3 standard Tele sounds, and the 4th sound was the 2 pickups in series for a kind of thick humbucker thing. Now, I was never going to use that, and to be honest, it didn't sound that great compared to real humbuckers. So I've replaced the switch with a standard CRL 3-way switch. And I have also replaced the pots in this guitar. Not because there was anything wrong with the pots that were in it, and it was actually because Ron had done something right that nobody else ever really considers, which is, and I've talked about this on the channel before, but when you're a left-handed guitarist, most guitar manufacturers out there will use standard electronics in a left-handed guitar, and they will either have them working the opposite way around in terms of the direction of travel, so completely clockwise is 10 and completely counterclockwise is down to 0. So they're kind of backwards from what most guitars would be. Or what they more typically do is just wire the pots in reverse so they work the correct way around, but the taper's backwards, and the tone knob especially is completely useless. But what Ron had done is use some left-handed pots in here, so they sounded good and they worked the correct way around. But for me, I use standard pots in all of my guitars, and I just kind of wire them properly so they work the opposite way around to most right-handed guitars. So by doing the right thing, the pots were actually backwards for me. So I've put some of my VI pots in here, so the pots are now working the correct way around for me, and they match all of my other guitars, because I was forever turning it down when I wanted to turn it up and all that. But everything about this guitar is just next level, and I have never played a Tele that is as comfortable to play as this one. I've set it up for my strings. You can get the action literally on the frets before it starts to buzz out anywhere. It is so comfortable, and Ron rounds the edges of the fretboards over so they feel like a vintage guitar. All the fret ends are perfectly dressed. It is just the most wonderful instrument, and it is everything I was looking for in terms of a T-style guitar to one day put these really nice pickups in. But that said, the pickups in this guitar tell a story on their own. Now, these are some single coil Tele style pickups that were built by a chap called Bill Lawrence. Now, he's something of a legendary pickup winder. He's sadly no longer with us, but these were the last pickup design he ever worked on, and they're called the Micro-coils. So when I was sat away from home and I was taking this guitar apart and looking at them, I sort of looked at these pickups, and they have very squat coils, and I believe neodymium magnets in them. So the kind of vintage prejudice in me was thinking, I'm not going to like these pickups. I brought it home, set it up for me, plugged it in, and these are just some of the most wonderful sounding pickups I've ever played. You can still buy them. His wife and daughter, I think, still run the company, and they're not much money. I think it's $100 for a set or something like that. But they are so articulate, it is unreal. They just have an amazing clarity to them and such a punch. And it just goes to show that if you do have vintage prejudices, you shouldn't really listen to them. You should make your own mind up when you've actually played something and just go by how they sound, because these sound wonderful. So I am still planning on putting the really nice pickups I've got on order in this guitar, but I am not getting rid of these pickups. They might even go in my Japanese 52 because they are just absolutely incredible. Bill was known as being something of a pickup guru. He worked with Fender and Gibson and Dan Armstrong, I think, and Warmouth. Lots of people were interested in his work. And I believe, or so Ron told me, he was in the process of licensing these Micro-coils to Fender when he passed away. And then his wife and daughter decided to keep hold of the design. And I think Ron said that the original specs of these pickups were lost in a broken computer somewhere. So they're kind of, historical pieces in their own right, because these would have been built by Bill. So anyway, that's the story of the Ron Kirn Barnbuster. It is just one of the most wonderful instruments I've ever played, and this wood being 200 years old just blows my mind. And it sounds absolutely incredible to boot. It's so easy to play, it sounds wonderful. It's just everything I could want in a T-style guitar. So today, folks, I'm going to plug this guitar into a few different amplifiers and just get some sounds going to show you how wonderful this thing is. So without further ado, folks, here we go. So there we are, folks. Now please do comment underneath, let me know what you thought of the Barnbuster today, which amp was your favourite with it. I love chatting nerdy guitar stuff with you folks down in the comment section. But this guitar is just absolutely blowing my mind. The playability is sublime. The sounds are just some of the best Tele sounds I've ever heard. These Bill Lawrence micro-coils are incredible pickups, especially for the price point. And with every amp I put it into today at every level of gain, it was just one of my favourite, most balanced Tele sounds I've ever heard, let alone achieved in this room. And the story behind the 200-year-old piece of wood it's built out of just really does it for me. I am blown away by this guitar. It's one of the best guitars I have ever bought or played. But please do let me know your thoughts, folks. I love getting your opinions down in the comment section. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you. Please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it makes a huge difference when you hit subscribe. You're going to be seeing this guitar a lot more on the channel in the future. And I will see you very soon. Bye bye.